Kevin mentioned, my name is Lynsay Spafford. I'm a postdoc researcher. Oh, they actually have one of my earlier presentations, but that's okay. This is consistent with what I was going to present today. So my name is Lynsay Spafford. I'm a postdoc researcher at the University of New Brunswick. And I'm part of a team of researchers from the University of New Brunswick, St. FX University, and Laval University in Quebec. And we also collaborate with the Department of Natural Resources in Nova Scotia. And so our focus is establishing what we've called the Acadian Phenocam network. And we're tracking forest growth and phenology across Nova Scotia in our natural stands in the context of climate change. And we're funded by Research Nova Scotia. We have a 5-year project, and we're just getting into our 2nd year now. We're also funded by NSCC as well. So first off, what is phenology? Some of you might be familiar with this term, and some of you might not have heard it before. But phenology is just a very broad term for this timing of seasonal events, seasonal life cycle events in plants and animals. So it could be as broad as the timing of when birds migrate or when bears hibernate, but also with respect to our plants and trees, the timing of fruiting in the spring and summer and flowering, as well as, for example, the timing of fish spawning. So it's a very broad term, and it's all about the timing of seasonal events and how they're affected by our weather cycles. So a big aspect of our project is leaf phenology, the timing of leaf life cycle events, and specifically when the leaves emerge in the spring and when they change color in the fall. And this is heavily influenced by our local weather regimes around the time of emergence, as well as in the past during the dormant season. And it's a really important indicator for the health of our tree species. And also it dictates the opportunity within a growing season for the trees to capitalize upon resources. So it's very important. And our second aspect of phenology that we monitor is wood phenology, and specifically the secondary or the radial growth, not the vertical growth so much. So we study when the trees start to grow in diameter in the spring and when they complete their growth in the late summer or fall. And this is also very much influenced by our local weather patterns and the growing season conditions, how much available moisture there was, and so on. So, why should we be concerned with phenology when it comes to our woodlots? Well, there's a lot of studies out there that have found that a longer leafing period and a longer growth season could actually lead to increased productivity or timber yields for some species. And this might actually change our harvest timelines for some species. But we're also seeing cases of when these conditions actually led to reduced productivity or smaller growth rates for some species. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a potential for a benefit of warmer and longer growing periods, but there's also potential for a reduced growth. And another aspect of phenology that's relevant for our woodlots is that leaf phenology is a really great immediate indicator of the kind of the health of our forests in terms of how they respond to disturbance effects and how they recover. For example, I collaborated with some researchers in Europe and the US, and we had a study here that involved subjecting some larch and black spruce to warming inside a chamber. And so in this particular chamber, the trees were warmed 9 degrees above the ambient temperature. And this actually had the effect of the trees losing their frost hardiness way too early. And then there was a frost event that happened in April of 2016, and it just decimated the trees there. There was mortality of one tree and damage to another tree. And this was really clear in the data that the leaf phenology was really early that year, the leaf emergence, because of this warming and also the dehardening of the trees. So leaf phenology provides a really good kind of indication of how the trees are responding right away to our immediate changes. And also there's some other aspects of leaf phenology that are relevant to our forest industries. An earlier leaf out that we're seeing over time could actually shorten the window of opportunity for maple syrup harvesting, as well as an earlier timing of radial growth. So that's going to be important going forward for our maple syrup harvesters. And also in Nova Scotia, and especially here in Cape Breton, we really are concerned with the fall colors and how that's going to change in the future. And there's actually potential for both earlier and later fall colors in response to the changes we're seeing. And we can see earlier fall colors in the case of really dry growing seasons, But we could also see later fall colors due to a warmer growth period as well. And so there has been a long-term trend, as I mentioned, of earlier leaf out and later fall colors. Maybe it's something that you've noticed in your lifetime, or your parents and grandparents talking to them and about how things have changed over the long term across Nova Scotia. But here's a picture from the States just showing the change from the 1800s to more recently, and that in the first picture, the leaves are either they haven't even burst from their buds yet, or else they're very immature, we can't really see them, and now, as of the 30th of May here, we see the leaves pretty much at full maturity. So there's been this long-term trend of earlier leaf out and also later fall colors. And so this could be beneficial, as I mentioned, but it could also leave our trees more vulnerable to disturbance agents during the spring and also the late summer and fall, and potentially reduce our growth patterns. So it's important to understand what's really happening for our woodlots. So the goals of our network are firstly to establish a long-term network across Nova Scotia, tracking how weather patterns affect our local patterns in leaf phenology and radial growth of our Acadian forest species. And we want to set this up as a resource for woodlot owners and other forestry stakeholders, that it's really accessible and easy to get the really near real-time updates, so daily updates on the status of our trees across Nova Scotia. If we want to see the effect of a recent hurricane or a frost event, etc., how did it affect the balsam fir, because perhaps you're a Christmas tree farmer and you want to understand that as well. So we want to really set this up as something that's openly accessible. And we want to apply our observations to develop some really improved models of phenology and growth, so we can have a better understanding in the future going forward, what trajectory is this species on versus that species, which one might be more resilient or more susceptible to different disturbance agents. So the three main sensors in our network, we have phenocams, dendrometers, and weather stations. So firstly, a phenocam is just a word for phenology camera. So we use this to track the timing of leaf out as well as the timing of our peak fall colors. And we can use this data with some research that I conducted during my PhD to also understand the immediate and long-term impacts of disturbance events on our tree health. So it's an automatic system, and it's a stationary time-lapse camera set up in the woods. Some of you might have encountered some of our stations across the province. You might see this aluminum tower that's 20 feet tall with a little trail camera at the top. But each station takes about 6 pictures per day and automatically sends them to us over cell networks. So it's a really cost-effective, low-impact way of monitoring the forest with a high temporal resolution. We're getting several images a day. And then our second big sensor we use is something called dendrometers. So these are very sensitive instruments that are attached to the tree, and they measure every 15 minutes the fluctuations in the diameter of the trees. So we can see how much the trees grow on a daily basis. We can also see when the trees are shrinking because of moisture losses or dramatic changes in temperature over the winter and during our maple syrup harvest window. So this is gives us a lot of information. We can understand when growth really starts in the spring and when growth finishes in the late summer or fall. We can understand our daily growth rates. We can understand when there's been shrinkage, and this is really useful data to compare over time to see, how many days did we have where the tree was shrinking in 2025 versus 2026 and so on. And this is also, just like leaf phenology, a great indicator of the health of our trees and how well they're doing. And then to get a really detailed understanding of our local microclimate effects on the trees, we have weather stations at each site where we monitor kind of the standard variables, air temperature, relative humidity, wind velocity, and rainfall. But something that's not so standard that we also monitor is soil temperature and soil moisture at 3 depths to get a better understanding of how our local soils influence our phenology and growth patterns. And something else that I haven't mentioned before, but we also are measuring the suite of soil variables at each site to also get a better understanding of the chemical aspects of the soil and the physical aspects and how they influence our tree growth patterns. So this is our current layout for the Acadian Phenocam network. So during my PhD, I established 12 sites on Crown land, public land, and then just as of last year, when our project officially started, we established an additional 12 sites, and I'm very happy to announce that we have 3 sites in collaboration with the Mi'kmaq Forestry Initiative, where they helped us to pick the site, and we'll be sharing a lot of data and information. So that would be the Dig 1 site, St. Croix site, and the Maple Brook site here in Cape Breton. So there's 5 sites in Cape Breton. And we really have a broad range of growing conditions for our sites here, and we're covering a variety of species. So we currently are focused on 12 species, where we have monitoring with both our phenocams and dendrometers. We have 6 deciduous broadleaf, sugar maple, red maple, white birch, yellow birch, red oak, large tooth aspen. And then we have 6 conifers. We have red spruce, white spruce, black spruce, white pine, balsam fir, and our eastern larch. And then just looking at some early findings that we've been able to explore just from our original network of sites, our 12 sites. So I took observations from these 12 sites as well as from the US, and I calibrated models of phenology for red maple and paper birch. And I tracked the timing, the predicted timing of when the fall colors will peak for these species over time. And I found that over time, we're going to see that the timing of the fall colors for red maple is pretty much stable. It's not going to get much later, maybe by a week towards the end of the 21st century. But then if we look at our paper birch, this tree will exhibit its fall colors much later, on the order of 2 to 3 weeks by the end of the century. So this will kind of change what the fall colors might look like. And this is just for 2 species. So it's interesting to think about our fall colors, what it will look like, and what that means for the health of the tree species. Does that mean that maybe if paper birch is holding on to its leaves longer, it has more opportunity, or is it maybe more susceptible to hurricane damage if the leaves are still active and we're getting the September hurricanes and whatnot? Okay, and then a little more information about how we want to help woodlot owners is that I just want to emphasize we're really conducting near real-time monitoring. So rather than using manual measurements and visiting a site once a year or once every few years, our instruments are measuring several times a day. And in the case of our dendrometers, every 15 minutes. And we're going to have this information available on our web platform so that people can view it anytime and get an update on within the growing season, what's happening for these tree species. And hopefully this can help us to have more practical information on the ground for harvest timelines, activities like maple syrup harvest, and often pest detection. So one thing that I didn't mention, but a big part of my PhD also, was how can we use phenocams to track the early signs of insect pests using observations from US and Europe, and we see that this shows up very clearly in the leaf phenology data through the phenocams. So that's another useful aspect, that as our sites are across Nova Scotia, we can detect the early warning signs of different insect pests. And going forward, putting this all together, this will help with climate change adaptation, because this will give us more information about how we can maybe protect our susceptible species. If we find that some of the really fast leafing species, like red maple for example, might be more vulnerable to frost, then this could be useful knowledge in that way. We don't want to plant red maple in a low-lying area, for example. And this can also help us to identify the really resilient species. And a big part of our project as well is responding to the... Hello? Yeah, okay, thanks. So a big part of our project as well is that we really want to hear back from you guys. What are you interested in? What would you like to see more of? Because we have this 5-year timeline for our project, but we're also interested in making it a really long-term initiative and planning to apply for future funding to keep this going. And we can always adapt and expand to meet your interests and needs. So I'd love to hear from you. So our website is currently getting set up. It's not available to share today, unfortunately, but if you do want to sign up to get some more information and subscribe, you can go to this link, or you can email me, lynsay.spafford@unb.ca. And we hope to have this website set up in a couple months, actually. So there you'll be able to log in and see the kind of a daily status map for the growth of tree species in Nova Scotia, and whether they're shrinking due to maybe some drought or suboptimal growing conditions. And also we can feature particular aspects that you're interested in. And I'd love for you to always shout out to me or send me an email like, hey Lynsay, I want to learn more about the frost impacts on this species or hurricane impacts here, or why don't you monitor this species, you should monitor that, and going forward we can expand our network to include that as well. So just key takeaways. The Acadian Phenocam network tracks forest phenology and growth across Nova Scotia using state-of-the-art automatic sensors, and we really are a long-term monitoring initiative dedicated to capacity building for yourselves and other forest stakeholders. And you can sign up at this website, Acadian Phenocam Network. So, thank you all so much.